Hello, and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly look at all matters property designed to be of interest to anyone who has an interest in property. And Property Matters is supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and Town and Country Property Auctions London. Now, each week we search out the stories designed to provoke thoughts, reactions, and of course comments. So don't be shy. Please post your comments in the comments section below wherever you're watching us today, whether that be on Facebook or YouTube. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to the page where you're watching us so you get notifications of our weekly shows. If you have any correspondence that you'd like to make with us, then please do get in touch, propertymatterstv@gmail.com. Joining us this morning, of course, as always, is Joe Joshi, our property expert. Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Paul. You'd think that I wouldn't be having to wear a cardigan or a jumper this morning, considering we are in August. But somehow we must have missed that sort of moment of the summer and just sliding straight into autumn.
Yes, it does seem rather ironic in the year that the government is determined to make us have a staycation, that the weather has decided to not turn up.
Yeah, I know. So
such a frustration.
Yeah, but that's the British weather for you. And but of course, the good thing about the British being our subject, property matters, are definitely always the talk of the town.
Absolutely right, and beautifully said as we go smoothly into our first story, which is more good news, and that is that inflation is about to hit 4% this year. This is the latest rate of inflation that the government has, the Bank of England rather, has said that they are expecting rates to go up to 4%. CPI inflation rate currently stands at 2.5%, which is already above the bank's target of 2%. And the bank says it will continue rising this year to 4%, but it will expect to fall back to 2% by 2023. And it's these rising energy prices that seem to be behind much of this inflationary pressure. The Monetary Policy Committee, the MPC, made a prediction that after unanimously voting to hold the base rate at a historic low of 0.1%, they voted that they would leave things alone for now. But the fact is that many of the analysts are saying this is quite a hawkish commentary from the MPC, saying that they're talking about tightening things up at this early stage, suggests that although they're saying they won't rise rates until 2023, that could actually happen in 2022. And the point of the story really for us to discuss is about those people that have bought these properties at the top of the market. True, many of them might have a 5-year deal on a low start, for example, but at the end of the day, it's about making sure you can afford the property when rates return to normal, as opposed to these abnormal times we were living through.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story to pick up on, considering the old adage of what comes down must go up, and what goes down must come up. It's a natural flow, and so first and foremost, the Bank of England and of course the government have done an amazing job to keep the interest rate as low as it is, and it's great for the home buyers. But unfortunately, not so much good news for the savers, and that's where the problems tend to come. It's about the balancing act of trying to keep as much money into the accounts as much as they want to lend out and spend out, and not at all a little surprising message here. There's an underlining message to say that basically it's coming. A bit like that, it's coming home, which has never come home so far, but being the football. But in this case, it's definitely going to be coming home. The interest rate will, at some stage, take a rise. We all know that, and have known that, in all honesty, for some time, that it will come back to that point. So everybody should always consider the fact that at some stage or another, they're going to end up having to pay a little bit more for the mortgage that they've already taken out. And I take your point on board about the purchases at perhaps the height of the market. That height of the market was created only by us as consumers, based on the supply and the demand, and the fact of the wish and the want of owning a home and having the opportunity to buy. And of course, I will go back and say that the pandemic, while it has had a lot of hurt in a lot of ways, it also had a lot of gain when people didn't spend as much money as they thought that they would do normally. And they've had the opportunity to save money and subsequently had the opportunity to now go and buy their property. So interest rates will, at some stage, perhaps not immediately, will go up. There's no doubt about it. I don't think they'll go up drastically. I don't think they're going to go crazy. But when you're having a whole set of costs in your cupboard, for example, your gas, your electric, your utility bills, your water rates, your local council rates, all of those have been affected in some shape or form. And even if they haven't been affected, Paul, they will have used the pandemic as their reasoning for increasing costs, as we have now found, even in every retail shop. I was talking to a timber merchant the other day who said that basically to get in just the stuff for extensions and so forth, all of those costs have now been passed down, and the customer is having to pay the extra money in order to do that. So at some stage we will expect those things, but yes, it's important to budget, make sure that you have that. In the earlier years, there was a masses of repossessions that happened because people had exposed themselves to a point where it was, more money going out than coming in. I think we are a lot older and wiser about that, and I think people are kind of more prepared now in terms of knowing that that could happen again, and the penalties of perhaps losing homes just because you haven't planned are huge, and I think people have learned about that too now. And otherwise, we are here as Property Matters. That's what we do. We discuss property matters. We're here to help, guide, and shape and advise the best we can in order to make sure that those situations can be mitigated. And we're happy to bring on any experts that are able to assist those things. So better to be forearmed and forewarned in what could happen at later times. But definitely, I anticipate that the interest rates will definitely go up at some stage. They won't be dramatic. Considering 0.1% is just unbelievable. I'm sure when you and I have lived through times of 15, 16, 18, and 20%.
Indeed.
It's a huge climb yet to get back there, and God willing, we're not going to head back there.
No, indeed. Good morning, Richard. Richard's joining us. Thanks for your good morning wishes, Richard. Nice to have you with us today. Anybody got any comments on the Bank of England rate? When do you think rates will rise? Let us know in the comments below. But it's interesting that one of the comments from a lady called Ruth Gregory, a senior UK economist, she says, after stressing at the start of the pandemic that it wasn't even thinking about tightening policy, the committee has just said that it's got modest tightening of monetary policy, can't get my words out this morning, over the forecast period was likely to be necessary. So at the start of the pandemic, Joe, they were basically saying there's going to be no need for tightening until 2023, and now they're going back on their word, it seems, saying, well, we might need to do something in the midterm. So one assumes that that's something like 2022, perhaps. So it's an interesting twist, and obviously whether they predicted that, of course, prices were going to rise in this way. And you see, for example, I saw something on the news this week where a chap was importing board games for Christmas, and those big tankers that you see, those big container units that you put stuff in from China on the boats, he pays £2,700 for every container of games. That's his transit cost. And because of what's going on in the world, and because of where we are now, that £2,700 has risen to £15,000 per container.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's going to go on the price of the games at the end of the day, and therefore any other product that's in those containers. And, of course, all of that is coming to our shores ultimately, which is, again, along with these energy prices, is all going to start to fuel the situation. And it does seem to me, just being personal for a second, that you can perhaps understand why, but just everybody seems to be trying to make back the losses of 2020 in 2021 already. You look at the holiday industry, the prices of holidays are ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And you think, well, you can't blame them to some extent because they had such a annus horribilis last year, but all of this is going to go the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, taking on that subject of holidays and the hospitality industry, I mean, it just was probably almost one of the worst hit industries in the last 18 months. I mean, and we haven't really seen the beginning or the end of its bloodbath yet, because people have tried to sort of contain and sustain the restaurants, the hotels, the pubs, the clubs, the bars, etc., etc., etc. But there's been ongoing cost, and ultimately, yes, the government was supportive in a lot of those things, but some of them are not going to recover. Some of them are just not going to be in a position to get back, and all of those industries obviously are desperate to make up their losses, their monetary losses in other ways. But that's also going to be different because people's mindsets have changed, Paul, too. And because they've had time to sit at home and rethink their own strategies. Whilst it's nice to go out and nice to go and have a meal out and maybe go and do all these things that we'd like to do, they're very cautious and conscious of what those costs are, only because they've had time to sit back and think, my God, did I really pay that for that particular part? And look what it is. And as you rightly say, from a personal point of view, you look at maybe what a holiday might have cost you, 18 months, 2 years ago. And today, for a family of four, which is my own family of four, you would look at, just for the tests alone, you are got to put in a couple of £100 into the. So it's another grand, £1,200 that you've got to allow for tests over and above. I think
Yeah.
I mentioned in a previous program of having a discussion with somebody who said to me that they'd gone back to visit their family. The actual cost of the airline ticket was £9 one
Yeah.
way and £10 return, but the cost of actually the tests and the taxi drive, or the delivery from their home to the airport, was £40, and the cost for the injections, or sorry, for the tests, was £230 or something ridiculous. And it just, so they are making the money back wherever possible, and it's going to be challenging, but all of that will come back and hit us there. But the good thing about the property aspect of it, because obviously we're a property show, as he says, a family show, and the good thing is that the investment that people have made into their home, into creating that sort of sanctuary, that loving place that they want to call home, want to go, is the best investment that you will ever make. And it's so important to get that right, to protect it, to make sure that you spend wisely and have that protected going forward, and considering all these inflationary costs and so forth. And a little tip from a personal point of view again is that there's a lot of companies that will come out and start to say to you that switch over to us because we're cheaper. I've been through that journey myself and looked at it. And to be honest with you, sometimes you wish you never signed those things. I'm not going against those companies. They all got to make money. But the hassle of switching from one to another, and then it's never their fault. It's never right for them. It's always the only thing they can ever do is apologize. Have you ever listened to a recording? I'm sorry about that. The only thing I can say I will do is apologize for the fact that we've now charging you £500 for the muck up that we did for you, but we can but apologize. And that's all they ever say. And so my apology for you as the viewers and the listeners is that don't make that silly mistake of jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, thinking that you're actually saving a couple of quid, when actually all they're going to do is apologize to you for spending more of your money. So do be cautious in making those switches. Sometimes you are better off with the devil you know.
Absolutely. And always good to get proper professional advice, particularly where things like mortgage and so on are concerned. Let's move on to something a bit more specific to the home. And I know this is a subject very close to your heart. So, how do you make the most of the property that you've got? At the end of the day, it costs so much money nowadays to move. There's not enough stock on the market, as we've revealed many times on this show. So, what better job than to just stay where you are and do something more with the property? But the question is, what is the most valuable change that you can make to your home to increase the value? And the answers are out this week, thanks to an article by Ryan Bembridge in Property Industry Eye this week, which basically says that a loft conversion has the most transformative impact on the sale price of your property. So a loft conversion, Joe, can increase the property value by 20%. The downside is it will cost you about 33.5 grand to put it in, but it raises the price of your home on average by £51,000, which is quite interesting.
Yes, a very important subject, and certainly a subject that is always and has been always close to my heart. I often see the changes that people make, and sometimes they're emotional, and sometimes they're actually calculatedly good changes that can enhance and better the properties that they're in. Um, um, so I'm going to obviously look at this very, very carefully for all our viewers and listeners, and at the same time, I'm going to walk you through the journey of what makes things right for any home, is in my opinion. And I'll state that as my caveat, because obviously my opinion is probably not going to be shared by many other people's opinion. But I have 40 years plus now behind me to be able to give you some guidance as to what, God knows. Somebody actually asked me the other day, Paul, do you know how many homes you have sold in that 40 years? And I have to say that I didn't actually have the answer, because I cannot remember how many people in those years that I have actually moved, and what influence and impact that I have had. However, I think it's been pretty vast, and for the simple reason that I'm still here doing the job that I've loved the most. And then to get up on a Sunday morning and have you there and chat to everybody else, it just tells you the passion that exists inside us to do this. So let's walk into our homes and into the journey of what makes things right and what makes things wrong. So from a personal point of view, I think that the thing that really affects the value and the goodness of your home to the starting is always the outside. I've said this not once but a million times, that the front of your home, the exterior, the presentation of that, and your neighborhood is a great foundation stone for the value of your home. Because if it's an area, and you have to get into my mindset in this, and ask yourself, if you're driving down Acacia Avenue and you decide to look around you, you make a decision in your mind that that is where you'd like to live. And you'd like to live there because they look nice, the gardens are nice, people have maintained it, they've decorated the front, the windows look clean, the outside look, the roofs are looking, it's all about front appearance. You know, I have a terminology, we know we buy with our eyes, and we do buy with our eyes. We drive through a road, and if you see a house or a front with a bricked up cars or lots of rubbish outside and somebody hasn't cleaned it, and your neighbors are just messy people, then all of a sudden that affects the value of your home. So it's very, very important to get, you know, a collective in a nice way of all of you and your neighbors to say, look, you know what, we've invested a lot of money in this property. We all want to live in a happy environment. What you do behind the front door and the closed door is up to you, but it would be really nice if you can just all keep it clean and tidy and so forth. And if you've driven into an area, a new area, you will always see the roads that you go, oh, this is a nice road. And then you go to another road and you go, oh my God, look at this place. And that's got nothing to do with the inside at all. It's purely external. So you can add a lot of value to your home based on what it looks like from the outside. And walking through the inside, as you go through the front door and you go into a lobby area, you can actually almost put off any potential buyer or interested party by that first step. into your front door. If it's over cluttered and you can't move around and you've got your shoes stuck there and you've got your coat stuck on the coat hanger and you've got to kind of, juggle your way through to the next step, you've already made your mind up this place is too small. Irrespective of whether you get to this fantastic grand lounge, open kitchen diner, funky kitchen, greatest bathroom with a jacuzzi, all of that kind of stuff, great. But the person coming in has already made their mind up that this is too small because it's cluttered. It's not right. So that space must be left open and clear and clean for that person to think, well, actually, you know what? It's nice from the outside and it's getting better just as I step in now. And then the journey starts for the rest of it. So the loft part of it, starting at the top, because obviously we must protect from the top, working our way back down. The problem with lofts and the good things with loft, the good things is obviously it creates that extra space, and it's very, very important to be able to do that. So do get it done by a professional who understands how the loft and the roof area is converted. There are a lot of people have had these things done kind of shoddy, half done, not protected the flooring, not done the right joists and so forth. And that is subsequently meant that they've had structural problems in the rest of the property because all of a sudden they're putting on weight at the top of the house, which was actually not designed to have weight. Because the roof area is the lightest area because there's not going to be much there. But all of a sudden, you have a habitation. You're going to live up there. You're going to, put a big bed up there, and you're going to put all sorts. And you're going to walk regularly into that space. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of movement going on, and because there's a lot of movement going on in the loft area, you must make sure that you get the right guidance, get the right quality of a builder, and make sure that all of these calculations for the support are done correctly, so you have the appropriate amount of support created to make sure that that loft conversion is done. Where it is in flats, do check your leases. Make sure that those leases tells you that you own the loft space area. And many mistakes have happened on this where people think, well, I'm actually on the first floor or I'm a masonette and I've got a chance to go into the loft and I'm going to do that. But actually, you don't own the loft area. So you could spend lots of money doing it up, thinking that it's okay for you to do that. And you'll find later on that the landlord will come along and say to you, actually, thank you for doing that, but it's not yours to have. And so you might have spent 20, 30, 40,000 pounds doing something, and they could actually tell you that you've got to rip it out. It's not yours to have. So do take caution, especially where leases are concerned. It's very, very important. Freeholds, obviously, you own the house or most of it until you paid your mortgage off, and you can kind of do pretty much most of the things that you want to do. So calculations at the top are very important, space upstairs. But bear this in mind, and I know it's going to sound like a sermon, and I knew you said that, Paul, because it'd be like my favorite subject. So, so bear this in mind that when you start at the top, it's not just the 30, 40,000 pounds that they're talking about the loft conversion. You have created yourself a nightmare because you're now going to have all of the floors done. The builder going up to that top is going to completely mess up your staircase and damage all the walls, taking the materials up to the top. And then the lady of the house will tell you that now that we've done the top part, the architraves and the other bits on the doors of the other bits also need painting. And then you start the next room and the next room and the next room. And before you know it, that £50,000 has become £100,000 because, you're now going to have to redo the entire house. And while you're doing the house, by the way, the cupboards need doing and this needs doing. And before you know it, you might as well knock the frigging thing down and start it all over again. So it's a good idea. But do be cautious and think about the long damages that would do. So have the money ready for the rest of it before you start to do the smaller idea. I mean, people will tell you they're cautious, but you've all done it. You've painted a bedroom and you think, I've done this one, and the next one comes along, but that one's down. You've looked after the sibling on that side and my one needs doing, and then her indoors comes along and says that one needs doing, and before you know it, you got crisis on your hand. So starting at the top sometimes maybe not as effective unless you really need the space. So we go back downstairs for a minute again,
Yeah.
and
So I was going to say, because coming back downstairs, the next best
yeah,
one is the kitchen.
yeah.
So
I'm
if
just
you've got
saying,
an
coming
outdated
back
kitchen,
downstairs. I just thought I'd give you the hard chat, the costing for the top. So just that, if you're gonna think of doing it, do be careful. So come back downstairs, and as you move into the lounge, live in the kitchen, and so forth. Obviously, the trends have changed as fashions change regularly. There was a time when Sarah Beanie, a TV presenter, made sure that everybody knocked every wall under the sun out in their house, because open space was the space to have. But I can tell you from very reliable sources, most of them are you people that own them, that was a good idea then, and it's a rubbish idea now, because basically you need more space, you need a study area, you need maybe a utility area that you used to be knocked into one. So the kitchen became the utility, the fridge freezer, the washing machine, the tumble dryer, everything all came into the one because we knocked everything out. And now we have to put everything back because we don't want the noise of the kitchen, because part of the time that you might be working from home is probably going to be on the kitchen table, which is the open plan. And her indoors has got the washing machine running at the same time and the dishwasher, and the thing just doesn't gel anymore. So people like utility rooms back in. People like a second lounge dining room or a study back in. And so therefore it is important. And conservatories have been a good addition, probably a more cost-effective addition. And recently, if you've all been Facebook fans, which you are because you're all watching on our part of this on Facebook, you will see that the new concept of roofs that are now being offered and marketed, so that you don't have glass roofs and it looks like a permanent roof, and it's going to keep the heating, etc. So there's a lot of investment going into the new types of roofs that you can have on your conservatories, making it a home. Remembering one thing, that the conservatories are supposedly temporary additions, and therefore you probably haven't applied for planning permission. But if you do make it a permanent feature, you may be liable to having getting planning consent. So do check your circumstances there, as far as that's concerned. And I think the structure of utility areas have become more and more popular, and moreover, a little study area is now a big on the list. But I'm waiting for you now. I'm going to pause now, Paul, because I know you're probably sick of listening to me, and I'm waiting for you to tell me
well,
the bits that the survey is telling you are good or bad. Let me see how wrong am I on this.
no, you've been pretty much right. I got a lot of love on Facebook for you. Absolutely right, Joe. That was on the Sarah Beanie comment earlier on. What a load of old nonsense it was, knocking all the walls out. But to give you the other points, which are quite interesting actually, because the kitchen can add £14,000 to your average property. The budget, they say, for putting the kitchen in is 8,000, so therefore you make a 6,000 gain on the overall price of the property. But for people that don't have the 14,000 or the 33,500 to put them in the first place, one of the best suggestions they make, which I think is a really interesting one, is if you don't have a lot of cash, putting in a downstairs loo, the average cost of that install is 3,000, but that will add 5%, would you believe, to the house price. So that's a great tip.
Absolutely. You can't get enough loos in at the best of times.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so adding another one, that's not only going to add the opportunity to flush a few times, but to add and make you flush a little bit more financially is even better, really.
Indeed, and they say anything that adds more space, because obviously the race for space that we've all been talking about, but anything like a conservatory, the loft conversion, or anything like that, where you're going to actually add more ground space, is always going to be a good tip to do, and always going to add value. The least valuable renovations include landscaping the garden, which will lose you £1,500 compared to what you put in. £5,000 to do at the average landscape garden, 3,500 is all it'll add to the value of the home. And interestingly, solar panels, which many people, I suppose you'll get the saving off of those ultimately, so you'll get some of the money back. But the 2,700 it costs to put the solar panels on only adds about 1,300 in value.
The problem with solar panels, I like the idea, and I have looked into this for those that are viewing, uh, but I just find them incredibly ugly. And if there's anything that could put you off buying a property, it is those disgusting solar panels that just don't do it for you. And yes, I think financially long term they may have a gain, no doubt about it. It's not that exciting. I did look into a couple of people in terms of the solar panels that we try and get across. But they don't seem to add a aesthetic, eye-catching look of your properties. I'm told, and I have tried to investigate, that there are panels that are more blendable into the tiles and the styles of the roof. In the United Kingdom, we enjoy character, culture, and diversity. And there is absolutely nothing character, culture, and diversity about a plank of solar panels on a very nice, old, established property. It just doesn't do it for anybody. So I'm not particularly surprised, though I think going green is going to be the future. And if every car's got to be electric going forward and everything else that we're going to have is electric, boilers got to be electric, then solar paneling has no, we've got no choice. We're going to have to go down that route. In order to do that, it might be worth, and I had this little crazy thought that people should collectively buy some farmland or some green area as a collective, and then put all these solar panel farms, as you see as you drive up and down the motorways now. And then therefore you don't actually have to put them on the house, and you can actually have your own station directly giving you your own electricity, and you can enjoy that much better, and it's just kind of not as ugly as the rest of it. So you never know. Come to me and we'll work out a collective, the new cooperative of solar panels designed by Joe Joshi. We'll do that.
We've got a message from Karusha Thomas this morning. Awesome show, thank you. Are your shows available on Catch Up? Well, yes, they are. They're all available on our YouTube channel. So if you search Property Matters TV Live on YouTube or even on Google, you'll find our channel. So if you go to the channel, and I suggest you subscribe so you'll get the notifications, but even if you don't want to do that, you'll see all of our shows listed week by week, right the way back to what was it, Joe? September or October we started? I can't remember now.
It was about then, yeah. I've aged another year on this.
I know. Yeah. You're going to see what we used to look like all that time ago. So yes, Karisha, yes, you can go and get the shows. And similarly on Facebook, it's a little more of a faff on Facebook. Oh, actually, if you go to videos on Facebook, you'll be able to see them in a list there nicely in the same way that you can on YouTube. So yeah, every show's there ever since we started, including all the ones with the cock-ups in. We didn't even edit them out, did we, Joe?
No. What you see is what you get with us. That's it.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's an interesting story. So we've talked about this extraordinary first 5 or 6 months of 2021, which has seen records being broken in terms of property sales, and land registry data is now available for those first 5 months. And long and short of it is 13.8 billion, so nearly 14 billion pounds worth of property was sold every month between January and May of this year. This is some new research analysed by Keller Williams UK, and they've got the latest sold prices data. So basically, over that period, 68.8 billion pounds worth of value has been has transacted, largely thanks to the stamp duty holiday, obviously. So what they've done is they said, well, where do people move to? Where was all the action? Where were people going to? And not surprising, the top 10, of course, because it's about value, dominated by London. So NW3 was the postcode where people wanted to move to the most in terms of value. So Camden and Barnet topping the table. £262.5 million worth of property sold in that one postcode between January and May. Then it came on to SW19. SW11, SW18, but interestingly, getting down a little bit further out of London, the first postcode in those top 10 areas was Brighton and Hove, BN3, Joe, £206 million worth of property. So a lot of people moving out of London and coming down to Brighton on the coast.
Yes, so you may have heard me say this before, but we actually moved to the coast to end our journey of life. Where that is the trait of the sort of the wish and the want of the people that live in the cities and the suburbs and the working life of the United Kingdom. We always think that going to the sea is where it is. I think there was another survey carried out only this week to say that there are so many more people moving to the coast because of the fresh air and the better life and much healthier and of course a better value. So I'm not surprised to see that places like Brighton and Hove and I'm sure somewhere in your fantastic charts there, Paul, will be Bournemouth and Poole and Dorset and
Yep.
Devon, and all of those are areas, and especially throughout the pandemic 18 months or so, they really took the higher end because people were able to start to rethink how their life was, and by having the chances to work from home, having the race for space, all of those things that we've touched and talked about, started to create that sort of graph of everybody doing a mass exodus from the cities to the country, or certainly those that could to the next step, and that step would be to go to the coast and make things happen there, which is good, which is excellent. And UK has some amazing coastlines, which normally have just been avoided and only are good for holidays. And the reason is that everybody comes to the bright lights of every city, be it London, Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, all of those places where work is found, and people think that that's where it's going to be. But when you look back at just the last 10 years, you will see that there are new brands and names that have emerged that you just never ever imagine that those will be the things that will be actually directing and giving direction to our lives and playing major roles in our lives. Things like Amazon. You can live in the middle of nowhere and somebody will deliver you whatever you want to deliver now, because you can buy it on Amazon and so forth. That was not the case. You can work from wherever you want to work as long as you've got good internet connection and you can travel. So all of those things have made all of these areas more and more interesting. And of course, Northwest London, as you said rightly, has taken the lead, and this will probably continue for some years, I'm sure, because it's the way we now are beginning to plan and live our lives.
Yeah, if you look, Theresa May and yourself will be pleased to see that SL6 was in there, Windsor, Maidenhead, and Buckinghamshire in general. So Brighton was the top two, BN3 and BN1. This is outside of London, obviously. SL6 was third, and then BN2. So really, Brighton very popular. Then, as you said, but Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole, New Forest, Trafford, Manchester, Cheshire East. Obviously, that's the kind of the south of the north. And then you've got Southend, Bath, the Mendip Hills, Wiltshire, East Somerset, and then finally Horsham. So interesting to see where people were going to, and that's obviously where the prices, I suppose, are having the most upward pressure overall.
Supply and demand, Paul, always, isn't it?
Yeah.
No matter what you are doing, whether you're buying a packet of crisps or you're buying a house, it's all about the supply and demand. And it's basically, that's where the demand is. Those are the areas people want. They're the areas they like. And can I just revert back to my comments about the presentation of the homes? These are all the areas that you're talking about where people tend to invest, take care of. And when you drive and want to go to your holidays, you go for your break, you go to places like Brighton, you go to places like Bournemouth and Devon, and you come back and you go, it's a lovely place to go and visit. It's very expensive, but it's a lovely place to go and visit. But you talk about it being a positive. At the same time, with respect to Margate and other places, why are they not featuring? There's nothing wrong with Margate. Margate has a great coastline, but unfortunately, people are not as caring about that, and it's not as exciting as perhaps some of the other areas. So I think it's very important for those that live there to make sure that those that visit you want to visit you again, and it's not just a one-trick pony. They don't come once and then take their rock and go back again and say, I'd rather go back to Brighton. So it is very, very important to create that supply and demand and make sure that your home and your area and your road and your street and your town and your village are well presented for those that come, but they maybe stay rather than just leave for once.
I'm just waiting for all the social media backlash from our Kent viewers this morning for not taking care of their properties.
That's all right. I
Anyway,
don't mind
moving on.
that.
Moving on. Londoners fleeing the capital for the regions even. What's interesting about this story is that they reckon that this is PwC, the accountancy firm. They reckon that London's population, which of course hit 9 million in 2020, could fall as low as 8.7 million. They reckon 300,000 people are leaving the capital or have already left the capital. And that's the biggest annual drop since 1988. The first 6 months of this year, London has purchased 61,800 properties outside the capital. So in other words, a large percentage, 8.6% of Londoners from inner London have bought the outer London properties. So that there's been an exodus, and that's still going on. And many people were considering, says the report, of moving out maybe sometime in the next couple of years. But the whole pandemic thing just brought that all forward, and everybody's done it at the same time because everybody got on the same bandwagon, according to PwC and Hamptons. So interesting figures to see that the population will fall. I guess when overseas visitors are back and properties start to be purchased again, that's going to correct itself in some way. But they don't see it changing anytime soon. And it's been the largest exodus, with the biggest number of purchases for out of London coming from inner London, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's a combination, Paul, of exactly what you said. People not being able to get into the UK over the last 18 months. So that has obviously slowed it. People that are in central London are planning and had good values on their homes. So therefore they can actually get a bit more space and better value homes on the slightly outer skirts of London, still having the communication. The change of the way work is done has made a big difference. This is just a blip in the landscape as far as I'm concerned. This time next year, when you tell me the same figures, they would have gone up. The 300,000 would have expanded to maybe an oversupply of 600,000, because all of a sudden the immigration system would have kicked back in. People would have traveled. People just haven't been able to get in. I mean, they have tried desperately through many different sources on dinghy boats and things like that, but it just hasn't, given them the full flow to be able to get in and then come in and work. I mean, the number of people I speak to in the hospitality industry at the moment who are suffering from people staffing, primarily because people just haven't been able to get in, or have chosen to leave and not come back because they've probably found jobs in their own countries now. They're doing well. For example, there was a huge number of people from Poland at one time that were home, but a lot of them decided to settle back at their own homes, which is not far. But at the same point, that things in Poland are thriving, the industry is thriving. So, so people sometimes leave and never come back. So there's always going to be some sort of figure changes. And central London is always going to have that. There's always going to be a little bit of a ripple effect from in the centre going outwards, because people want to better their lifestyle. They want to have more space. They want to have better schooling for their children. They want to have better communication. And not everybody wants to spend their life on the M25 going inwards, because it's the biggest, most expensive car park sometimes you can have.
Mm. Well, they make the point here that by the end of the year, 108,000 homes outside the capital will have been bought by Londoners. And they're saying this is the first time since 2006 that figure's gone over the 100K. And the last time that happened, of course, around 2006-07, we were just heading into another similar challenging time, weren't we, if you think about it? And it's quite interesting to see that the first-time buyers who were renting in town think, do you know what, actually, I'm not going to buy in town. I'm just going to go and look outside on the outer regions of London, or even outside the M25. Because I suppose now, with the technology and the fact that companies will allow you to work from home, you can go and do that.
Absolutely. And, the opportunity is still there. It's a vast opportunity right now for first-time buyers, investors, to consider their opportunities in other parts of the UK. That has become more and more apparent throughout the last 18 months, definitely. And the stamp duty holiday for up to £250,000 still exists till the end of September. So, there's zero cost in terms of that. And what you're getting for your money outside is quite phenomenal. And I kind of feel a chart coming on very shortly on that, because I know you love those sort of things. But the opportunities are huge, and people should still consider that you can get on the first run of the ladder elsewhere. And if you create your life there and you make your life there, the chances of you actually thinking that I want to go into London is going to be lesser. It's just that if you start your life in London, you become London orientated, and that's what happens. And that is it is a desire. It's a feeling of big city things. People that have lived in places like Hong Kong. Those people, because Hong Kong itself is pretty much a massive London. They love London. And very rarely are they. It'd be like fish out of water if you sort of stuck them in the middle of Bournemouth, because they'd be thinking, "This is really quiet. This is not the city life that I'm used to." So, horses for courses. People that come out of cities all over all over the world, go back into the cities and like city life. But it is just a change in their personal life and circumstances that then makes them think about the ripple effect. Where do I go next? And some of those are life-changing decisions. Perhaps children coming into your family are a reason for them thinking, well, actually, I want to have a garden. I want to create more space for my child to grow. The education system might be better. There's more parks elsewhere. All that kind of stuff kicks in. Things that you can't do, perhaps, as well in the cities. So I think it is a ripple effect and it's what makes United Kingdom so attractive time and time again, because people think, well, I can go into the town centre, I can live there, I can have all the life I want, I can have my pizza delivered whenever I want it delivered, but now I want to go out and have a barbecue in the garden.
Our last story today, because we're running short of time today, actually, that is quite shocking, really. Another piece reported in Property Industry Eye: government won't build 300,000 homes a year until 2028. So you remember the government pledged to build 300,000 new homes every year. They've never achieved that target. And just to show you exactly the figures, here they are. So they started off reasonably well. 2007, they hit 223,500 homes, and then it all seemed to go downhill after that, getting to a disastrous 2013 when there was only 135,000 homes built. And based on these projections, there is a company whose name escapes me at the moment, who's just basically gone through, and Stripe Homes have gone through, and they've actually predicted, based on the growth and the patterns of the numbers built in previous years, they're forecasting that we will not reach the 300,000 mark until 2028. It does seem extraordinary, Joe, when we're sitting here with all these inflationary pressures on the housing market, and the fact that there's not enough stock. The one way to have really managed the boom and bust approach to house prices and the market would have been to have actually put some more supply in and really focused on investing the money in making it happen. That's the first point. And the second point is, how come we're not building 300,000 a year? What is the problem?
Okay, so the first answer to that question for you is, it would be damn boring, wouldn't it, if we didn't have all of this to discuss and talk about, and the fact that every consecutive government has never achieved its target. And long may that continue for the property industry. Not that I would like to think of it anything differently, because we in the United Kingdom love to buy our home, and we gauge our wealth by the value of our home. And if all of a sudden, by any miracle, all 300,000 homes were built to target every year to do the supply, then the value will probably not go. The supply and demand factor will go out, and you and I will be out of a job, because I won't be able to talk about property matters week in, week out, and all these lovely figures that you like to present for me to have a challenge with. The so I think that will. The second part of your question, in terms of why, the why is that our system is archaic, in the sense that we have huge planning issues and backlogs and views. And the planners that we have in different places, everyone has a different view. Now, the interesting thing about that is that in numbers and in statistics and in locations and so forth, it probably all makes the sense. You know, the size is okay, the location is okay, it covers the right amount, it looks nice. That every wish list on an application form for planning probably is ticked. But then there is a planning officer sits there and goes, I just don't think it works in the environment. It's just because he thinks it doesn't like he doesn't like it.
Mm.
That's the end of the discussion. You can spend, you know, how many thousands, hundreds and thousands of pounds developers, clients of mine spend on every application and employing architects and all that sort of stuff. And that's the other thing. Of course, that industry would suffer, wouldn't it, Paul, if everybody just built everything perfectly? Architects won't have a job to do because their job will be done in very quickly. Builders can just go out and build very quick. Everything will be too quick. And so I think it's quite nice to have the pain. But by having the pain, we mean we have the discussion and we have a program that tells us that, you know, these are the things that people have got to go through. But the reality is that there are people that sit in the system that actually don't allow us to do the things that we want to do. And in a funny sort of way, as much as I hate to admit it, it's not a bad thing that they're there. Because if that was the case, we would have some pretty ridiculous looking monstrosities in the wrong places with the wrong ideas. And so it's good to have someone that actually bucks the trend a little bit. I'm not saying it's the right thing, but it's good to have that little challenge. They shouldn't be really hard on people, but the challenge is good to have. Then we got the green belt. So I had a discussion the other day, and this would be interesting for you to actually come up with your statistics, just to correct it and bring it up to light for the next program. Paul, this is a little job for you. How much of the United Kingdom is actually covered? And I think you'd be quite amazed at the varying people's view. In fact, I'll put it out now for the listeners. How much of the United Kingdom do they believe is actually covered, built? And I think you'll be quite shocked that how many people think what those varying numbers are. And part of that is, and I'm not going to give the answer now, so that's your question, and that's your homework for next week. But but I think that those are all the reasons and all the things that make it, you know, a great place to invest.
It's interesting that there are 93,000 families in temporary accommodation and 1.1 million households waiting for a social home, and yet we're struggling. And it's interesting to look at those figures because the government changed in 2010, when at the point when it was at its lowest ebb of 135,000 a year, and it has to be said that it's been pretty woeful since 2010. The figures, 2007, 223,000 homes were being built. 100,000 less for most of the teen decade. So, I mean, not that I want to be political about it, and the whole point of Property Matters is not to be political, but it does seem that the Tories have dropped the ball on this.
Yeah, I think consecutive governments have all dropped the ball on it, Paul. I mean, I can't think back the number of years that everybody wanted to have this target, be it red, blue, white, purple, or yellow. It doesn't really matter. The point is that there's the whole system that bucks that trend. And those systems are the reason why people want to buy. They want to buy, and the governments know that. All consecutive governments know that, Paul. They know that they tell you they want to do this and they don't deliver it. They don't do it because they know that this is a great income for them. The amount of receipts on stamp duty and people moving and changing hands and so forth is a system, and there's a reason. It's a business at the end of the day, Paul. It's a business that the government runs, based on the fact that they have an income from all of the work that is involved, applications for planning, local authorities, local searches. All of these things are costs that incur in making this thing happen. You make this right in one big swoop, and there's a whole bunch of things that also suffer. So I think you'll find that there's a method behind the madness, as much as it doesn't always sort of gel. But looking at it cold-heartedly as a business, the government is running a business to make sure that the housing market keeps fueling all of the other businesses that it has to coincide with. and some of them we've covered. I mean, earlier on we covered, extensions and development and roof loft conversions and all those things, kitchens. Every one of those industries are reliant on the housing market continuing to do what it does at this moment in time.
Just discovered 5.9% of the UK is built on.
There you go.
Just under 6%.
And isn't that quite astonishing as a number? That when you look from the sky down and you think of the UK as 100%, but I'll tell you now that you've given that away, a lot of people say it's 40% or 30% or 50% or 20% or much higher. The reason is because the only bit they ever see is when they're in the town. So where they live, they see that it's just built up. And so from a planner's point of view, every planner looks at it and thinks, but when you look at it from a value point of view, then you say to yourself, well, okay, it's good that it's only 5 or 6% that is actually built. And the easiest way to answer that question is if you drive from the south to the north on the M1, what do you see? Either side of you pretty much all the way, apart from around Milton Keynes, where they've now started to put massive Amazon buildings and so forth and depots. But other than that, most of it is farmland and countryside and so forth. And it's quite scary to think that you can travel from one side of the country to the other and hardly see anything. So it is done for a reason. And the reason is exactly the points that I've covered, that's what makes us want to buy and invest in property, because it's not only the safest place, but it's the best investment you'll ever make.
Well, we've certainly had a very thought-provoking show today, and thank you to everybody for your comments today. And just to reiterate that you can catch up on our shows, of course, from previous weeks. They're all there on our YouTube channel, Property Matters TV. If you search that, or Property Matters Live TV Live, you can search either of those and you'll find our channels. If you go onto the pages, you'll see all of our videos listed there, and you can just track through the year how we've charted out the race for space and this rather heady 6 months that we've had in the property market, Joe.
Absolutely, and it's for me it's been a real privilege doing this every Sunday morning, because it's the subject very close to my heart. I love it. I've done it for so many years. But what makes it even more exciting is that people join us and praise us and work with us and listen to us and come back to us and say that those were good, helpful tips, and they partake. And we bring in a number of different professions when we can get a hold of them to come in and join and share their views, and we will continue to do that. It is exactly what it says. I think property does matter, and it's one of the top subjects that affects every person's life in whatever shape you want to do it, whether it's buying a caravan or a mobile home, up to a mansion. We all want to have a home that we love.
Thank you very much, Joe. And there we have to leave it for this week. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution. I hope you enjoyed the topics we discussed this week. We'll have plenty for you, of course, again next week when we have another Property Matters at 10 o'clock. See you then.